Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you guys yet again for tuning in to today's show. Our second ever live show yesterday was fantastic. A lot of good interaction. Keep it coming in the comments. I want to hear from you guys more. We'll talk about this more and more as more live shows go on here on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. But yesterday was a smashing success. So thank you all for supporting me and the network as well by coming and showing out today. But before we begin today's show, I do want to remind you that in order for our live shows to continue to be as good as they have been, we need your support. So if you do feel so inclined, make yourselves availed to the super chat, super thanks, and super sticker abilities you now have as a YouTube audience. You can also leave any tips or donations as well. They are greatly appreciated by both me and my fellow podcasters. Go check them out and the network as a whole. Without further ado, let's jump into today's show. It should be another good one. Yesterday we did our NFC divisional betting preview. And today we are transitioning to the AFC. And we are going to be looking at all those in the division. And then also we are going to be looking at the conference as a whole. And then our final segment will be a little fantasy football segment where I talk about some players who you will have to fade, unfortunately, in my humble opinion, come fantasy football draft time. Without further ado, let's see some more people coming in. As more people come in, I expect more comments, and we'll get a lot of interesting dialogue to dissect these divisions here. And we start off up east, where I am kind of, the AFC East. And the AFC East is that division where it's going to be very competitive, but it's also been going through changes. A lot of teams in this specific division have risen to be contenders in their own right. And with those comes ifs and thens for all of these different teams. You have the Buffalo Bills, right? The divisional favorites at plus 180. They lose a lot of production, though, on the offensive side of the ball. They lose a deep threat in Gabe Davis. They lose their top receiver, whether it be through frustration and tensions within the team or just because he wanted to explore pastures new in Stephon Diggs. And now you have a team whose top receiver has really been more of a gadget guy. Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir showed sparks last year. As we get into other comment, Diggs, by the way, we are talking about my man Mikey's team right here in the Buffalo Bills. They did lose a lot of production, though, I will say. But I'm still very excited about this. I think that with that loss of production comes less pressure on Josh Allen to perform, and he can become more of a guy who suits the system that is in the direction that this offense is trying to take. I think he will have a fantastic season, and the odds for him to win MVP look rather enticing at plus 850. They are kind of long, but this season, why not him? I think that Josh Allen is perfectly set up in this offensive system to kind of get to that point where he doesn't necessarily have to force things down the field. That's always been the big caveat with him. Turnovers have always plagued him, but this year I think it's going to be a different story. So Bills fans should be very excited despite the fact you lost a lot of production. On defense, yes, the Milano injury is a big deal. And yes, Von Miller's getting up there in age, but I do think that there's going to be a lot of youth in this defensive side of the ball that's going to come forward. I really like that partnership of Benford and Rasul Douglas in the secondary. Highly underrated. So I think that the Bills are going to be a team that is going to be in the reckoning in the AFC East. I'm really excited for them. And then let's transition to the Dolphins for a quick second, because the Dolphins were a team last year that really looked like it could be a Super Bowl contender, but really fell by the wayside come playoff time. And the question marks surrounding them really lay on the offensive side of the ball. Yes, they have Tyreek Hill, and we all know what his speed brings and his versatility and electricity as well. But the further questions lay with Tua Tagovailoa. Is he a competent enough quarterback to lead your team in the postseason? As we saw on that very cold night in Kansas City, that definitely was not the answer. He's a warm weather guy. Maybe it was just not his night, but that's a concern going forward if you're a Dolphins fan, that Tua will have to play in different environments in the postseason should the Dolphins not necessarily be a high seed and get that many home field games. So that's something to look out for the Dolphins as well. And this year, the most popular bet for them is going to be under 9.5 wins. And I know it's kind of skeptical considering all the talent they have, but I'm really low on them, especially in fantasy as well. We'll get to some of that in a bit when I talk about players to fade. But the overall scope of the Dolphins right now is a team that's good, but not good enough to win you games in the postseason. And it's going to have to change. That narrative's going to have to change because they're relying on Tua right now. They're relying on Tyreek Hill. They're relying on this offense. You have the youthful Devon Achane at the running back position, but it just all has to coalesce and come together when it matters most. And while I do think they can sneak into the playoffs, even if they go under that 9.5 win threshold, I still think that in order for them to have success, Tua is going to have to step up in different conditions and adverse ones at that. And let's talk about the newest contender in the New York Jets. At plus 180, they are also in the reckoning to win this division, tied with the Bills in terms of best odds to win this division. Now, the reason why I'm so mixed on the Jets is that I really want this team to succeed because it has all the pieces in place. Fantastic defensive players at every single level. In the front seven, you have Quinnen Williams, linebacker Quincy Williams. In the secondary, you have Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed. And those guys are fantastic. Offensively as well, you look at Breece Hall, perhaps the second best running back, at least in terms of fantasy in the league, but also a player who is very diverse, can run and receive. And then you have a guy in Garrett Wilson who, despite inconsistent QB play, kind of like Drake London in the NFC with the Falcons, has been a guy who consistently has been putting up fantastic seasons and compiling a fantastic track record as a receiver. And then Mike Williams comes in from the Chargers. I like his profile. I think that Allen Lazard, there have been a lot of questions surrounding him actually about whether or not he's going to be cut or even move on to another team. But he's a weapon for Aaron Rodgers. So let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. He was a hot topic yesterday when I was talking about, players who in fantasy really fit the bill in certain situations. But Aaron Rodgers, like I said yesterday, he fits a certain profile as a quarterback. He fits the profile of someone who is going to be more comfortable in timing-based offenses. And it shows in the OC hire that they brought in, Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett's system did not work in Denver because Russell Wilson was not a timing-based quarterback. So he works with Aaron Rodgers, and magic happens. But this time around, I'm not as confident. Yes, they shored up the offensive line. Yes, they added Olu Fashanu to the draft and Morgan Moses. But I think that ultimately, you're asking too much of Aaron Rodgers in a timing-based system in today's NFL to win you games. And I don't think that a 40-year-old guy is going to keep up with the times. And the best bet for the Jets, in my humble opinion, is shedding Aaron Rodgers' salary and going out and getting a younger guy in the draft. Maybe not a high-level player like a Carson Beck or Shadur Sanders if they're not picking that high in the draft, but maybe in later rounds, someone like a Cam Ward might fall into their laps. But that, I think, will be the best situation for them. I still think Aaron Rodgers may have something left in the tank, but it's not Super Bowl left in the tank, if you know what I mean. And then, last but not least, the New England Patriots, a team heavily in transition as well. Gone is Bill Belichick and what he brought to this team, if he brought anything, because that whole debate about who was more important than them will continue to rage on. But my favorite bet for the Patriots is a bad one. They are bound to have the worst record in the AFC. As my mom, Meryl Shepard, asks, how many games do you think the Jets could win this year? And let's be honest, they're a very volatile team. I think right now, with the pressure on Aaron Rodgers' shoulders and the fact that I don't think this offense is suited to the modern NFL and what they're asking of Rodgers, I think that their threshold is 7 to 8 games and potentially having to sneak in as a wild card. I really like the offense. But the caveat here has to be Aaron Rodgers. So a 7 to 8 win threshold, addressing this question, is perhaps the best way to diagnose the Jets at this current moment in time. And let's get back to the Patriots, because they are projected to have the worst record. Let's go from someone who could have a positive record to a worse record. At plus 320, that's a very comfortable bet. I think that right now, as much as I love seeing Drake May succeed in the preseason, looking very good, looking very poised, very accurate, a lot of all those traits that people were talking about when he was coming out of college in North Carolina, coming into effect, I just don't know whether this transition from Bill Belichick to Gerard Mayo will be as seamless as people might expect. It's going to take a while for the Patriot way to really mold itself in Gerard Mayo's image. I really like the hire. Fantastic player for the Patriots. Was a linebackers coach for them, so it's an in-house hire. But at this current moment, when I look at the landscape of the AFC East, the Pats are consistently the worst team. But the three teams that I have in front of them, the three teams that I think are all going to be there and thereabouts in terms of wanting to make the playoffs, the Bills, Jets, and the Dolphins, is going to be a fantastic battle. And while this division isn't necessarily considered a quote-unquote tough division, it is one where interdivisional games, and especially games in the NFC, will really affect the power balance in this. I want to see how these teams compete, especially Miami and Buffalo, against the elite of the AFC, who we'll be talking about later in the show, because both of those teams have so much depth and promise, and I really think that they're Super Bowl contenders, but there are several question marks. The Jets as well. Can the Jets really coalesce around Aaron Rodgers, really coalesce around Nathaniel Hackett's system, which is kind of archaic in today's NFL, and really focus on that? And if so, they will also be in the reckoning for a playoff spot. But at this moment in time, I think the best bet is the Bills to win this division, maybe to win the AFC as a whole. I also really like the Josh Allen MVP pick, as the weight is being lifted off his shoulders, or the tension between perhaps him and Stephon Diggs being alleviated with him gone. But that will just about do it for this segment. Thank you guys for all the comments you've been leaving. Let's keep them going, because we'll be talking about one of the most exciting, most fearsome divisions in all of football, the AFC North. What implications lay ahead in terms of betting odds for that division? We'll find out after the break together.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.